Hello and welcome back to Let's Play Betrayal at Krondor. Now, there's no gameplay in this video. Instead, this is just a quick primer for those who haven't read the Rift War novels, so that the plots and the events in the game might make a little bit more sense. We'll get back to the game in the next video, but for now, here is a history lesson. Part 1. The Dragon Lords.
In the ancient past, the Valkyru ruled. The first beings upon Midkemia, they were titans, beings of power who rampaged through the cosmos, riding upon the backs of dragons, from world to world, pillaging and slaying and looting. They weren't evil, but only because concepts like good and evil were totally alien to them. They were perhaps worse than evil, more dangerous, because they were indifferent, knowing only power and domination. They created the elves to serve them, along with other beings to please their sensibilities. Their battles across the cosmos caused the gods to come into being. The Valkyru saw this threat to their power and rose up to fight them, and the Chaos Wars raged across the universe. Finally, from hundreds, only 16 gods remained, but the Valkyru were defeated. In their desperation, they did something unthinkable, put aside their own mutual enmity to combine their power into one amalgamated being. Draken Korin, one of the Valkyru, had created a gem, a powerful artifact that would later be known as the Life Stone. This would drain all of the life from Midkemia, killing every elf, every animal, plant, everything, rendering the planet lifeless and barren, and also robbing the gods themselves of their own life force, which depended upon that of the creatures of the world. One stood apart. Ashen-Shugar, the mightiest of the Valkyru, somehow felt something alien, something new. He felt something other than the pure drive to conquer and dominate. He felt a desire to protect his world, to preserve it against any threat. Why would a Valkyru feel such a thing? How could this be? Well, you gotta read the book to find out more about that. But regardless, Ashen-Shugar slew Draken Korin, and the Life Stone was never activated. Draken Korin's essence, along with that of the rest of the Valkyru, became a mindless, rampaging entity that would later become known as the Enemy. And it rampaged across all of creation before the gods were able to cast it out of reality entirely. Ashen-Shugar knew that he wanted to protect Midkemia, but he also knew that he'd become irrelevant, obsolete. So he sat upon his mountain throne and allowed himself to pass away. His power, his might, his essence, most importantly his drive to protect his world, passed into his armor, where it remained, waiting for the day that someone else might come along to put it on. Again, you should read more about that in the book.
Part 2. Kella Wan.
When the enemy raged across the cosmos, many people fled its coming. Some with the power to do so opened rifts in space to travel to other worlds. Thus came the first humans to Midkemia, and likewise they came to the world of Kella Wan. I've already mentioned both worlds in the previous episode. If Midkemia followed a more traditional fantasy political structure with feudalism and kings, Kella Wan developed a structure based on some Southeast Asian tropes, with an emperor, courtly intrigue, and houses vying for influence. And on this world, the magicians are set apart, and their word is law. See, a crisis once faced the world. The enemy actually threatened to return to the universe, destroy their world, and the magicians were delayed in acting because of political infighting and delays just caused by complacency. And the world of Kella Wan ended up suffering greatly because of this. Ultimately, the emperor himself ended up creating a city for the magicians to live, where they would be able to finally work together with no interference, with all the resources they required granted to them. And the crisis was ultimately solved. Kella Wan was restored, and the enemy remained sealed away. But from that time onward, it was decreed that all magicians would no longer be subject to the whims of politics. They would serve the empire, and in return, their word would be law. Their every command obeyed, even by the emperor himself. The magicians became known as Great Ones. Anyone displaying magical talent was taken away from their home to the city of the Great Ones, and most were never seen again. There, they were put through intense training and testing and conditioning so that their greatest overriding desire would be to serve the Empire, protect their world. The Assembly of Magicians often disagree among themselves what's the best way to do that, to serve the Empire, and they work that out amongst themselves. But because so much is asked for them, they devote their entire lives to serving what the best needs of the Empire are. They are given ultimate authority. To countermand the word of a Great One is death. What's not known by most people on the world of Kella Wan is that most of those taken by the Assembly don't survive. They die during the training. What's also not known is that only men survive. All women taken who show any magical talent aren't even allowed that test. They're killed immediately. The Assembly does not permit women to become magicians. Now, at the time that this story is set, Betrayal at Krondor, this ugly truth is not yet known among the general populace of the Saranuani Empire. Now, Makala, who was already mentioned in the previous episode as a Great One visiting Midkemia, who had lost a ruby, he'll become important to our story later on, so remember that name.
Part 3, the Rift War Saga.
Okay, what you need to know from the previous books. There was a war between Midkemia and the Sarani Empire on Kella Wan. The Great Ones opened up some rifts in space looking for resources, and many battles were fought. Some Midkemians were taken as slaves back to Kella Wan, including a young lad named Pug who had been training to become a magician. He was eventually discovered to have magical talent, and so he was then taken to the Assembly, where he overcame all of the trials and became a Great One. Now, a lot of other things happen, but he eventually returns to Midkemia at the end of the story at the conclusion of the war, and he founds an academy for magicians upon Midkemia, so that all people with magical talent, men or women, young, old, rich, poor, can all come and study and learn, free from any prejudice and fear. Now, another young lad, Pug's friend Thomas, ends up becoming a soldier. He remains on Midkemia and is not captured, and he eventually finds Ashen-Shugar's old armor, and he puts it on. He ends up nearly being possessed by Ashen-Shugar, but eventually the mind of the boy and that of the Dragon Lord come to a kind of an accord, and they end up somewhat merging to form a being with the kindness and the morality of the young man, but the Dragon Lord's fierce desire to protect the world and much of his power. Now, they both go through many adventures, but at the end, together, they're able to seal the portal connecting the two worlds so that the enemy that had become aware of this portal could not use it to return to reality, and thus they end up saving both worlds. Now, Pug and Thomas grew up as young men in the court of Krondor. That's a duchy on the far western shore beyond the elven forests. You can't even see it in the map in the game because it's just so far out of the way. Duke Kondoin, the ruler of Krondor, he was a relative of the reigning king. And when the king and his heir were both ended up dying during the story, during the struggles of the Rift War, along with the Duke himself, the Duke's oldest son, Liam, was the closest relative left. He became the King of the Isles. And his brother Arutha, who you might have heard us mention earlier, became the Prince of Krondor, the next in line for the throne. Arutha is the protagonist of the second book in the series, Silverthorn. He's a brave and a just ruler and a major character from then on. He's a neat character. And he was helped on his adventures by a young thief named Jimmy, sometimes known as Jimmy the Hand, who also becomes a major character. Jimmy is fiercely loyal to Arutha, and he eventually becomes a squire himself and meets a young noble named Locklear. The two become fast friends, and you may remember you've already met Locklear, who's now no longer a squire, but a seigneur, a noble in his own right, and one of the three members of our current party.
Part 4, the Moradel.
When the Valkyria were cast out of reality, Ashen-Shugar went to the elves and the other beings the Valkyria had created or had enslaved, and he told them that they were free. The reptilian Pantathians, who had served Alma Lodaka, they hid themselves away and devoted their existence to trying to find some way to bring their mistress back. The Eladel, the elves who had served as farmers and tended the fields of the Valhiru, they went to live in the forests, deciding to live in harmony with the world and the new races that had arrived there. The Moradhel, the elves who had served closest to the Valhiru in their households, still desired their power, and instead they sought out the relics and weapons of their former masters to continue their heritage, taking what's known as the Dark Path. They sometimes align themselves with the goblins, and they often fight against the light elves and the humans. Among the Moradel, a great leader rose up, Myrmindamus, who promised them glory according to prophecy, and he led the host of them southward in a war of conquest. Pug, Thomas, and Arutha, after many adventures, confronted Myrmindamus at Sethanon, where his true purpose was revealed. He was no true Moradel, but a Pantathian in disguise. His goal was to uncover the Life Stone, which I mentioned previously, and which was buried under the town of Sethanon. He sought to activate it, to consume all of the life in Midkemia, to destroy the gods and bring back the Valhiru and their former masters. Myrmindamus ended up being slain, and the Moradel were routed in defeat. Guards were placed in the Chamber of the Lifestone so this crisis might never happen again, and it seemed that the land would now enjoy a hard-earned peace. Pug returned to his academy to teach his students, Thomas returned to the forest and to his elven queen, and Arutha returned to his capital to rule and raise his family. That's pretty much everything you need to know about the backstory of this game. There's so much more, of course, a rich world waiting to be discovered, and I really recommend you read the books for yourself. In the meantime, however, you should be up to date and ready to enjoy the rest of the game. I'll see you in the next video.